Hello, I am Joel McLeod.
I'm Roland Tanner.
And welcome to the 905er. There's big news in Hamilton this week. Once again, the infamous light rail transit project has been put back on the front pages. This city project has been debated on for just over a decade in Hamilton city politics. Careers and reputations have been made based on which side of the argument a politician has stood. This seems to be the issue that will never go away, although that may have changed. This past week, the federal government announced that they would be funding the project for $1.7 billion combined with provincial funding to actually build the LRT. That's as long as Hamilton picks up the cost of the operating system. There now seems to be an actual plan to get this project completed. All that's left is for Hamilton City Council to vote and approve the go-ahead. However, this is Hamilton, and nothing is that simple. Why is it that this amazing news for a major infrastructure project that there still seems to be a cloud of uncertainty hanging over the LRT? To answer that, we invited Laura Babcock onto the podcast to enlighten us. Laura is well known in Hamilton. She's the owner of Power Group Communications, a PR firm here in Hamilton, and a media contributor on current affairs nationally and the host of The O Show. In addition, she's an advocate for the LRT project in Hamilton. Laura joins us to share her expertise and insight into why this project is not only important for the city, but as well why the city has been unable to move forward on it, despite other municipalities in Ontario being able to build LRT systems of their own. Today, we dive into the nitty-gritty of Hamilton city politics. Have a listen. I would like to thank Laura Babcock for taking time out of her busy schedule to come and join us today to talk about the biggest news in Hamilton, it seems currently, is the Hamilton LRT funding update from the federal government. Huge news right now. I think anybody in Hamilton, this is what you're talking about around the dinner table or around the conference table in Hamilton. Rather than me clumsily trying to summarize it, Laura, why don't you just bring all of our listeners up to speed on what the latest development is for the Hamilton LRT project to date?
A $3.4 billion with a B investment commitment from the federal government, from the federal Liberal government. And the reason why that is so significant is that a few years ago, the Wynne government provincially had said that they would do $1 billion funding towards the LRT. And then not only did that continue to be a source of contention in Hamilton about who would pay between, $1 billion wasn't going to be enough at the end of the day. What are the operating costs versus the capital investment, et cetera, et cetera. There was another mayoral election on the very issue, that making it at least the second one. And then, of course, Ford came in as the provincial premier and scrapped the project. So this is the latest iteration in at least, I'm thinking, a 12-year saga. And I will stipulate off the top, way back at the beginning, the city of Hamilton hired my firm to produce a video. This is when Fred Eisenberger was mayor, Fred 1.0, and we did a video on all of the rationale for the LRT, the environmental benefits, all the public support. I remember we put in newspapers in the video and interviewed all the proponents, and it was happy times way back then. And then it got literally off the rails, and there's lots of reasons why it got off the rails over the last 12 years or so, and 50 plus council votes that we can discuss. But the reason why this weekend was so significant is that not only was it a lot more money, closer to the true cost, at least for the capital piece, but also it wasn't open for debate, whether it would be BRT, bus rapid transit, or LRT, light rail transit. And that, of course, is going right to the heart of the contention here in Hamilton. And so the federal government was pretty much saying, this is how the money's coming, take it or leave it kind of vibe. And so, of course, now we've got council looking that very gift horse in the mouth very carefully.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like, if you're pro LRT, in Hamilton, this is it. Like, this is what you've been waiting to hear, is that no ifs, ands, or buts. Mm-hmm. Funding is there. Somebody's going to build it. And basically the cost of operating it, because it is a municipal project, if you will, be Hamilton Public Transit operating it. They would have to operate it. But the cost of building it is going to be borne on the backs of the federal government. So, I mean, if you're pro LRT, this is a pretty sweet announcement for you, isn't it?
It's a huge deal. And I have been pro LRT as a commentator for years and host of my show here locally. But I've nowhere near been in the trenches as the Chamber of Commerce has, or people like Ryan McGreal and Hamilton Light Rail and all the other groups that have fought so hard for this for so long. It's a huge announcement because what it does is essentially takes away the question of, well, is that money, that billion, going to be enough for capital costs, right? So it gets rid of that argument. It also says very clearly to council, guess what? This is clear now. This is not a $1 billion funding envelope like the province announced for a transit project in Hamilton. This is for LRT specifically. And that's born of the fact that clearly McKenna understands what has been keeping this project down for 12 years and the political divisiveness around it. So yeah, it's a huge win for LRT people. And you saw some of them taking that victory lap. However, I would also argue that there is a tremendous amount of trepidation because council has not said $3.4 billion. Woohoo! What a huge generational investment in Hamilton. Let's take it and go. Instead, as I mentioned, they are checking out every single tooth in that gift horse's mouth to see how they can protect themselves for re-election, right? Which is often what plagues our city.
We'll get into the details of why Hamilton seems to be so cautious about this project, which seems for someone who doesn't live in Hamilton like a kind of a no-brainer. But just before we get into that, this is a major change of direction for the provincial government, isn't it? It seemed that we almost had the shovels in the ground for the first LRT project. It seemed that we'd finally got past the final kind of election on this issue, and the pro LRT side won. And then it was cancelled, and all kinds of arguments were made about cost overruns and blah blah. What has changed their mind so radically that they are willing to not only put the LRT back in place, but pony up a bigger chunk of money than they probably were going to do in the first place?
Well, that's a great question. I think the fact that so much work has been done on the project, that you've got developers like Leona who have been proactively pushing for this relentlessly because they know that this is not about just the train. Yes, high order transit's excellent. It's about the nodes. It's about the investment. It's about the buildings that are literally in design, if not already in construction, on the promise of this project, right? So I think that what changed probably in the provincial perspective is the federal engagement and investment. If the feds are on board and they're going to put, it's a single tax dollar. We're all still paying for it. It doesn't matter, who's giving it to us. It's all our money. But when you have the federal government saying, no, actually, we've earmarked it for this specifically, you've already had all the work done on the line itself. It's been years that this is really, it might not have been shovels in the ground, but they've been making preparations, and there's been investments, and there's been business planning. And, for years I've talked to all my clients in Hamilton about this issue because they were looking at what it would mean for their business and their employees and possible, investments or developments or whatever. So it's a investment in the future of the city economically. It is a huge win. And so I think that when you have the feds pony up, then the province, it's hard to say no. And it should be hard for council to say no, frankly.
Let's just get a bit into the weeds on this one, because the alternative that has been touted is we should have a bus rapid transit system in Hamilton instead of the light rail transit system. And essentially what you're doing is, instead of building tracks going down a dedicated route and having an electric carriage, for better term, running along that trail, you have a dedicated bus route. So buses would just be presumably speeding up and down another dedicated route. I'm still trying to wrap my head around what the difference is between a BRT and an LRT in terms of the outcomes. I think like an LRT, it's less environmental impact because you don't have diesel fumes spewing out the top of the train. It's you know where it's going, and you can't. The problem with the BRT, but the bus rapid transit system, is that you can change the bus routes, which impacts, as you were saying, your economic development. A big chunk of this was meant to be an economic shot in the arm. Maybe that's a bad turn of phrase in terms of vaccines, but the current state of affairs. But it's supposed to be a shot in the arm to Barton Street, the Barton Street corridor, to just kind of revitalize that neighborhood, which is in bad need of economic revitalization. So, May, can you just give us, as emotions aside, just what is the difference here in terms of your outcomes between the two systems?
Well, there's two systems and then there's two tracks, right? There's the A route and the B route. And one route was the former Mayor Bob Bertina, who just today announced that he's not going to run again as a federal Liberal MP because the Liberal government is investing in LRT when he was pro BRT and he likes a different route. So there's the one route, the other route, and then the length of the route. Is it truncated too soon? Does it not even meet Stony Creek? So there's issues around the route and the coverage of that route. There's also issues around the difference in the vehicles, right? So I'm no expert on the actual merits of the vehicles per se, but I am an expert in public relations. And I will tell you that having a light rail transit train, higher order transportation, the investment that creates, the stability of that route, the nodes that are going to develop around it and the spill off to the other communities is significant. I was doing a speech in Houston a couple of years ago, and I remember seeing the BRT zip up, or the LRT, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. Like, you get a sense of this is a city for the future. This is not a city left behind in the rubble. It's good for attracting talent to the city. It's good for keeping our kids here working in Hamilton because it means that we are a place on the move. So are there merits to bus rapid transit? Sure. I think one of the merits is that councillors think that the bus rapid investment could then extend out to their communities and make them look good in the election. A lot of people don't. The real issue, and I'm sure we'll get into it, it's my last point here, is that a lot of it is about the fact that it's a lot of money for downtown. And we live in a tale of two cities here in Hamilton, the mountain and downtown, and that's a whole other issue.
I was just going to make exactly that point, that, to what extent is this really not about whether councillors are pro or anti-LRT. It's about whether they want money spent in somebody else's ward or LRT. And I think, that's a very depressing aspect of this whole picture. And I mean, I'm literally, and this is off the wall for the discussion today, but it's like literally starting to think if LRT cannot get built, in essence, because of suburban councillors' votes, what, should we be looking at, de-amalgamation, letting Hamilton get back to the situation that it was before, where it can actually, the central part of the city can actually decide its own affairs. Now, that's a complete side issue, but what, or maybe it isn't, feel free to comment, but...
Well, I was just going to say that it's everything. The parochial ism in Hamilton is a massive, massive problem, whether it's area rating or the investment in LRT or anything else that we're trying to navigate as a city. Because if you drive, I'm always blown away that I almost have to get to the 401 on Highway 6 before I'm out of Hamilton, right? Like the African Lion Safari, I think, is in Hamilton. It's massive after amalgamation, right? And so the experiences of some people in Hamilton are closer to going to downtown Kitchener than they are to downtown Hamilton. So you can't blame people post-amalgamation from not feeling the love for a city they hardly associate with. But it's worse than that. It's not just suburban versus downtown councillors, because some of the downtown councillors or close to downtown have been the biggest problems with LRT going forward. It has so much to do with what always is the issue in this city is, how do I get reelected in 4 years? I mean, some of our incumbents have been around since the 90s. It's insane. So are they ever looking at the big picture investment spill-offs, or are they always saying, what is Joe at Tim Hortons going to tell me on the weekend? And I think that's been a big part of our problem.
I don't want to go down a de-amalgamation rabbit hole, but do you think de-amalgamation should be on the radar at all?
You know what? It's like when people say to me, should term limits be on the radar? Sure, always look at it. New provincial governments will come in and they'll want their own ways of operating. It solves some problems, but it causes others, right? I don't think term limits are going to happen before October 24th, 2022, when we get to make some elections in this town. And I don't think de-amalgamation is anything reasonable in the short term. I'm a strategist. I like the long view, but I also like to actually make an impact within the window that you have. And in Hamilton, the LRT question really is going to come down to, can those parochial interests be overcome by the greater sense of investments. There's going to be a lot of horse trading going on. That should have been done in the interim, by the way. I blame the mayor for that. He should have had these votes lined up before the announcement, but that's another story.
I think it's important also to bring into this conversation. It's not just Hamilton that has been having this debate. I know because I've seen it and it's amazing to see in use. But Kitchener-Waterloo had this debate. I don't know the number, like almost over a decade ago, I think, about. And I'll be honest, I'm a graduate of the University of Waterloo, so I know for a fact they were having this debate when I was in school. There, they were talking about not necessarily light rail, but we'll have a train, like a tourist train going from all the way from St. Jacobs and North Kitchener-Waterloo all the way down. At the time they wanted to bring it all the way down to Cambridge, and that was too ambitious. But I mean, they figured it out. They have a great light rail transit system that is intended to hook up with St. Jacobs, which is a rural community. You hook up in the northern part of Waterloo, and you take this light rail transit all the way down into downtown Kitchener. It works. Here in the 905, Hamilton is not unique in this debate. Mississauga actually has both BRT, and they're planning on an LRT running up the length of Huron, Ontario. Why is it that we have two municipalities of comparable size to Hamilton? They seem to have figured it out. It is working. Hamilton, I'll be honest, Hamilton is not really a pioneer on this debate. Yet Hamilton still seems to keep stumbling over itself to settle the question, whether they want to proceed this way or not. Like, why is it so difficult just to come to a decision on this?
Well, so I had clients on the LRT route in Kitchener, and of course, Ottawa also has LRT. I even had, so this has been cities that want to progress and take investment money and create these investment opportunities go through the struggle of the LRT conversation. And I recall there were opponents to it in Ottawa and opponents to it in Kitchener-Waterloo. But what I also recall is that a critical time in the LRT discussion when Bob Bertina was mayor, and he'll correct me, I'm sure, if I'm errant here, but he said on a radio show that he would not be the champion for LRT. And I remember feeling at the time, or hearing at the time, that the council, and I think it was Kitchener, actually kind of said, no, we will be the champion for the project, right? They sort of, there was a different level of leadership and commitment to it. And again, I could be wrong. It's been a number of years, but why can't Hamilton have good things is the question, right? What is it about about our politic that doesn't let us advance? And the answer simply is leadership. I have had the privilege and at times the great consternation of working a lot with council over the last 25 years as a host of a show or on different city initiatives. And I know some of them personally, most of them I've had conversations with, if not all. And one of the things that you find in this city is the perspective on the city seems to be very narrow. And, it made me question at times if they ever even leave Hamilton and get to experience. When we did the sign in front of City Hall, the Time for Sign campaign, I did that and started that out of a frustration. I was traveling all over the province and I couldn't understand when I returned to mighty Hamilton, one of the oldest, biggest, coolest cities in the country, why we had nothing that said, welcome to mighty Hamilton, other than a traffic and population sign, right? So my point is that when I talked to council about it, some of them weren't even aware that they didn't have something other places had. There's a myopia here, and there is an easy gig for incumbents in this town. If they just please their local vocals in their neighborhood, they get back in over and over again. And so we get these opportunities as a city, and LRT is not the first or the last, where we do almost everything possible to keep ourselves from progressing and getting it. And mostly it's along the same battle lines. It's along the same value system with the same councillors who have been here for decades. So I really have to put it at the feet of the incumbents. Been here too long, too narrow a view, afraid of doing anything outside of their re-election considerations, and it has hurt us tremendously.
There's been a lot of talk about the need for a change election in Hamilton before LRT came back onto the table, and I certainly feel there's a significant population who feel time for a change, as the cliche goes. beyond that, I mean, we've seen today Bob Prucina, who's the federal MP for Stony Creek, has, in essence, come out very strongly against his own party here, which suggests, as you mentioned before we came on air, actually it hadn't occurred to me. Actually, you didn't mention, but we were discussing before we came on the air that maybe this is a precursor to another mayoral run, that he's going to use LRT as a way to get back to being mayor. Is that as big a disaster as I think it might be, in that you have a highly credible politician kind of coming back against an unpopular mayor who's pro-LRT? So Eisenberg's kind of good characteristic, from my perspective at least, has been the kind of pro-LRT aspect, and then a whole load of other not so wonderful aspects. That this kind of throws a real cat amongst the pigeons. And leading off from that, just how divided is the Liberal Party in Hamilton on this issue? Because we see multiple liberal connected people, Vito Scro, Bob Prucina now. I know that many of the candidates who've run, whether they won or lost in the past, were anti-LRT at previous elections. Is Justin Trudeau and the federal government going to regret wading into this because they're going to suddenly find their own party kind of working against them?
Oh, well, I would expect that would be a consideration they would have made, but they've got a powerhouse of Catherine McKenna, who was, heralds from Hamilton, so she knows the local politics. So when you've got a minister coming in, when you've got Philomena Tassi front and center in the announcement, politics is about power, and the people who have the power, Trudeau's ear, in cabinet, access, etc., they're all for it. So the Vito Scros, the Bob Prucinas can be as exercised as they want, but I don't think they're really relevant. What I think is important here is my living nightmare that just occurred to me this morning on the news, that Bob Prucina was floating a trial balloon about running for mayor. Because if you look at the last 2 mayoral elections in this city, it has been about this bloody train. And I want the train, but I don't want our entire legislative system to be caught up in this infuriating debate. So we're in a situation last time, no matter what you thought of well, let's go back one time before. Brian McCaddy, progressive candidate, a former cabinet minister, Brad Clark, and you had Fred Eisenberger, all running, right? And LRT was the issue of the day 8 years ago, or whenever it was, 10 years ago. And so you had Brad, who was pro-BRT, you had Brian, who was all LRT, all in, and you had, very cleverly, Fred saying, you know what, I'll ride the fence, get a citizen panel on it. He won. 4 years later, LRT again. And so you have Vito Scro say, I'm against the train, no train, no train. And then people, whether they liked Fred or not, had to vote for him because they wanted the train and the investment. My nightmare is Bob Prucina comes in as the Vito Scro, only can make a real fight for it. And then progressives will have to vote for Fred Eisenberger again to keep the train, or for Bob Prucina, who I did not think was a good mayor. And also we won't get the train. It's a nightmare. We need new leadership.
So let's play the politics game a bit here. Right now, I think I view it's on Fred's shoulders to get the ball, or I guess it's in his hands to get the ball past the end zone, into the end zone here. If right now, all eyes are focused on Hamilton City Council. What are they going to do next? Why isn't Fred Eisenberg just being the mayor and saying, putting some pressure on his allies on council, say, we got to get this done. I want this done, in the next few months. I want this brought to a vote. Let's get this done. Let's move it forward. Because if it is done, then it's done. Like, what is Bob Prucina or Vito Scro or whomever, or somebody out of left field coming in and saying, oh, I'm going to be the candidate who's going to completely reverse the effort done. The money that council will have dedicated or had spent already on getting this project up and running, because that's what happens. Are you going to have is somebody going to say, no, I want to undo the decision already done and all the money and all the effort that's been done on it, So I'm wondering, does Fred just have to just take it and actually expel some political capital to get this done?
Well, in the past, certainly mayors would have had votes lined up on an issue this critical. They would have worked and triangulated and leveraged and horse traded and exerted pressure. I have not seen Fred possessing that particular strength in leadership. And also, why doesn't Fred do many things that you would expect for a leader? He almost puts himself into the role of placeholder. And so do we have a strong mayor? I do not think we do. I also think that because of Sewergate and the Red Hill investigation, he shouldn't be the mayor again. So on this particular file, was he using the time between the total mess up around the Provincial announcement? It was a total disaster. Did he take any heat for that? No, but he should have. He should have been paying closer attention to the winds that were blowing at Queen's Park. In the interim, has he spent all of his capital, whatever he has, trying to get his colleagues lined up for this? It doesn't look like it, because I'm hearing the exact same arguments from the anti-LRT people out in the suburbs. I'm hearing the same, I don't know, BRT's better from some of the longstanding incumbent councillors. It doesn't seem like the argument has moved at all. So it makes me wonder, has he done anything in the interim? Or is he hoping the feds are going to save this? That's my best answer. I don't know what he does.
I'm going to put it two more quick questions on kind of arising from that. First one, just going back to what you said about the kind of parochialism of Hamilton politics, which I think is absolutely a huge, huge part of this and a huge problem. It's a general political malaise, not just in Hamilton, but I think particularly bad in Hamilton, that when political debates come forward, they are treated as if Hamilton is the first city in the world to have an LRT. It's like, no, there's 2 places within spitting distance, another one in Ontario. There are 700 odd cities in the world that have LRTs. And, if you list some of the better cities in the world, they tend to be the ones that have the LRTs. And the number of cities that regret getting rid of streetcars, even though that is a far less, even though what we're basically seeing in Toronto right now is a move from streetcars to LRT, those cities that kept them in the sort of 50s and 60s are so glad now that they did. No one's arguing that they're going to get rid of them and replace them with buses anymore. That short-sightedness is just... What is it about Hamilton? I mean, we had this similar debate when we were discussing the Tim Hortons field move from Ivor Wynne. And it's like, well, we have this wonderful lake. We have all these possibilities about a place. You think of San Francisco with their stadium on the on the sea, on the bay there, or what a wonderful place to have a stadium. And you end up putting it right back where it was before, where there's no parking and no transit. Hopefully there will be transit one day. What is it about Hamilton? I mean, it's such an open leading question that's not particularly helpful, but perhaps you have some inspiration that I don't have about why Hamilton suffers from this so much.
Well, I have a theory. And can I just say, you don't like the fact that they moved it 90 degrees?
Yeah, well, that made all the difference.
Okay, so my theory is this. That, and I say this because I moved to Hamilton right when it seemed like the worst of the recession, when, the front page of the spec was that this company shut down, this factory left. It was bad times. And I couldn't understand from the beginning, and I ended up getting a political talk show within a month or two of being here. I didn't understand from the beginning why a city with the topography it has, the location it has, the natural assets it has, the history, the old bones downtown of the cool buildings. I came from Montreal and Winnipeg and Toronto and Windsor and all the other places I've lived. And I was like, why on earth is Hamilton so down on itself? This city is killer, right? I knew nothing about it. Literally, I didn't know anything about the city. The first time I saw it was coming down the 403, which is a beautiful view, right? Yeah. It looks like it rises out of the woods. Yeah. It's gorgeous. And so what I started to realize was that hearts had been broken. Hearts were broken from the days when Hamilton was in its heyday, and subsequent political leadership that raised the downtown, all the old buildings, and cementified it and made tons of bad decisions. People got to a place of such absolute cynicism and heartbreak that they thought it will never be that way again. There'll never be thousands and thousands of great steel jobs. There'll never be these stores downtown that are lit up during the holidays and all this stuff. And so this nostalgic romanticism about Hamilton led to a sense of, screw it. There's no point in engaging. There's no point in trying. We can't have good things because we don't deserve it. A giant chip on the shoulder that is heartbreaking for me, not just because I'm in PR, but because I don't believe Hamilton is limited, right? But that particular chip and heartbreak can be exploited by cynical incumbents who know that people will not fight for something that they don't think they deserve. And so they keep accepting this mediocrity and this garbage leadership that we're getting out of this council. And they think, well, you know what? We were never going to get a nice thing anyway. We don't deserve that train anyway. Why should we? Like, it's so as long as the people of Hamilton, and I'm glad to see young people I know, young leaders, don't buy into this nonsense. But as long as there's a whole bunch of people in Hamilton who don't think we deserve better, we've got cynical politicians who won't try for better because they know they can easily come back in just playing that card, we are going to be stuck with the game that we've got. And so I'm hoping we switch the cards, and I'm hoping that we switch people's feelings about the city.
I just want to touch upon something you just said there, Laura, that because I agree. I've lived in Burlington most of my life, so I kind of get to be the guy looking in the shop window, and I get to critique how the display is going with Hamilton. And the one thing about the city is that it shouldn't be this way. As somebody who's outside looking in, I look at it and I say, you've got a world-class university with McMaster, a phenomenal college with Mohawk up on the mountain. You have an educated young workforce. I don't want to say workforce. I want to say entrepreneurs, just young people that are hungry to make a change literally in your backyard. You have a great history, a great culture, and a very diverse community. I mean, you have different neighborhoods of just very, the Croatians, Italian, of course, East Indian, it's a very multicultural city. And on paper, they're like, well, that's a formula for success. And maybe it's a matter like the old guard literally has to die off, and that might sound a little morbid to listeners, but it might just be a matter of the old guard has to die off, because Roll and I had on students from Hamilton students speak up, and you could tell that there's this hunger for change. We're not going to sit down and take it anymore. And I've always wondered what happens when you give them economic power. What happens when you say it's yours now? What are you going to do with it? And I always wonder, like, LRT is not going to be the save it all solution, but steel is not coming back in Hamilton. It is a done industry. It's being shipped off to China. It's not coming back. But I always wonder, like, why is there not a push to bring in your like biotech, electric vehicle manufacturing? Because you have the port right there. You can literally like build a Tesla or whatever other e-car you want, and just like roll it onto a ship and ship it off to America or wherever. Like it's got so much for it. And I'm just wondering, is that what it's going to take? Is it just going to be a matter of we just have to wait for a generational shift, or is there a way that we can empower these young people to say, run for office, be on boards, run for union leadership, and stir the pot, and just like part of my friendship, but stir shit up and change stuff, because it's yours for the taking. Is that what it's going to take?
Well, first of all, mad props for mentioning Croatians first, because I'm in Hamilton because for the love of a Croatian I married 22 years ago. So you've got a new fan for your podcast when my husband hears.
Well, we're looking to build our listenership, so I had to put a low fruit.
But to your point, not just Hamilton on paper, but Hamilton from the sky. During the World Cycling Championships, when they were showing aerial views of our canopied city by the water and the mountain, people around the world were like, "Where's this beautiful place?" So what Hamilton is on paper and from the sky and from every perspective, pretty much seems to be incongruous with our inability to advance ourselves. Right? We have every opportunity to the point that it almost becomes nauseating that we're so far behind where we should be. And so one thing that gives me a lot of hope, and I just before this podcast was in a rehearsal for the anti-hate summit that's happening in Hamilton this week that I'll be moderating parts of. And when I see the youth engaged in that, the Hamilton leaders that are coming up, they are not going to need us to sort of empower them. They've got the power. They're ready to go. I think what they need us to do is support them, to get out and vote, to say enough of this apathy, enough of this sense of it's never going to get better, so why bother? Because, if I ever hear that, I'm like, if I felt that way, I would have moved. I'm not from here originally. I got options. I got clients all over the province. I wouldn't be in Hamilton if I didn't believe that the city is coming into its best years. So the youth are ready to do it. All we need to do is make sure we get out the vote. We talk to our neighbors and say, no, you've got to vote. Come on. Like you have to, this time, don't just say it's the same old, same old. There's never going to be a difference. Let's just do it for the kids who are working their butts off to make a difference, right? So that gives me a tremendous amount of hope. So I think our role in it is to literally support it with what we do have a little bit older. I'm 48 years old. I own a company. I can support people through my voice, my platforms, my finances, by getting out the vote, by breaking down some of these old narratives and trying to inspire hope in others. So they cannot get around that table unless the rest of us support them to get there. But I don't think we need to give them the impetus. We just need to make sure that they have the access, right? And that's our role.
This is a cheeky question. Would you consider running?
You know what? It's not cheeky. I get asked it a lot. I always have. But you know what? I wouldn't. And the reason for that being is that I feel as though my best use of my skills is how I use them now. I've had a show for at least one show for 25 years in this community, including a lot of others. And I get to weigh in on important conversations like this at pivotal moments, right? Including my advocacy I do nationally. So for me, politics has never been my ambition. I talked to Mayor Larry Diani today because I put out there, oh no, are we going to have another LRT merry-go-round of Fred and Larry and Bob? And I said, they all think they are the job. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I think you feel that you can and should be the mayor. And he said, well, I do feel like I can be. And politics is a narcotic, but he said, I think we need diverse people and young. And I thought that was great that he said that, but he mentioned the narcotic of politics. I have always seen it as a narcotic. I know many, many people who have been addicted to it, and I don't see that as a healthy way to live my life, as long as I'm effective on the outside. If it got to a point where no one was running for mayor and the city was absolutely devoid of any kind of leadership, I might try to help, but it's not my ambition. Thank you for asking, though.
Just on that note, like Roland and I are old time political hacks, and we can attest it is definitely an addiction, and I would say a borderline mental illness to always want to chime in and weigh in on it. I see we are coming up on our limit here, but I wanted to just leave off the last note with you, Laura. If the fates don't allow LRT to pass in Hamilton, and it's just, we don't get past, and it goes into another municipal election, and it comes down to another election based on pro-LRT or anti-LRT, and this doesn't fail. What's the future of the project in Hamilton?
Wow, that's an excellent question. So, you've got the provincial election further off. You got a potential federal election dropping this fall, right? So I never look at things in isolation. This is an investment from the current federal government. Now, I don't think by the polling that there's going to be a change of guard federally at this stage. O'Toole hasn't mounted any kind of real offense or anything. But so there's always that as a consideration. I think at this point, and I don't want to jinx it, but I don't really believe in the fates. I think it's up to us to make this pass. I think that it is too far down the road. It is too far down the road to ever be completely killed. There are buildings going up right now based on this at McMaster, along the route. There has been too much investment, too much time, too much disruption. And if for God's sakes, if council manages to rag the puck all the way to the election and try to make it or ask for their stupid referendum so they can abdicate their responsibilities and get reelected, whatever their plan is, I think that there's just been too much work done already. And so it will eventually happen. My concern is that we not waste any more of our precious time in the city on a de facto project, that we move on to the mountain of other issues like combating hate that we can be working on in alignment, like bringing in new industries you suggested in green technology. There is more to put our time to than this tired debate. And so I'm very much hoping that, the $3.4 billion is just too big a price tag for councillors to say no to and expect to get reelected.
Okay, well, I'm going to leave it at that. And thank you very much, Laura, for coming on and sharing your expertise with us on this topic. Unfortunately, I don't think this will be the last time we'll be talking about this. But hopefully there'll be other issues in Hamilton that we'll want to bring you back for. So I hope you're open to coming back in the future.
This is fun. I will admit to being addicted to the conversation of politics.
Oh yeah, once you get started, you can't stop. It's just
well, it's good. It's the most important. People watch sports. I like to think that politics is the sport that affects your life actually. So people should be engaged. Thank you so much, guys.
Absolutely. Take care.
Just before we finish today, we're going to make a quick shout out to some of our Patreon supporters with our thanks for their support, as always, without which this podcast would not be happening. So first of all, I want to thank Mike Quackenbush, Shannon Gillies, Gail Laws, Lynn Crosby, Eric, Sean Vanderklees, and Kyle Selms. Thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate your support. It means a huge amount to us. And if anybody would like to join them, make sure you check out patreon.com/the905er. Thanks for now.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.